She was acquitted of hurting a single patient. Not one. The jury cleared Elizabeth Holmes on every count tied to the people who bled into her machines, the patients who trusted a drop of blood to tell them the truth about their own bodies. And almost no one remembers that. Because that is not the Theranos story we told ourselves. We remember the fraud that endangered the sick. The court punished something else entirely. This is what the record actually says. In 2003, a 19-year-old dropped out of Stanford with an idea that sounded like the future. One drop of blood, from a finger prick, run through a machine the size of a printer, hundreds of tests, in minutes, in your local drugstore. No needles. No labs. No waiting. She called the machine the Edison. She called the company Theranos. The idea was beautiful. That was the problem. Because a beautiful idea makes people stop checking. Investors wanted it to be true. The board wanted it to be true. She wanted it to be true so badly that, according to the evidence at trial, she began telling people it already was. By 2014, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. On paper, she was worth $4.5 billion, the youngest self-made female billionaire alive. The black turtleneck. The low, deliberate voice. The magazine covers calling her the next Steve Jobs. And underneath it, the Edison did not work. Prosecutors laid it out count by count. The device that was supposed to run hundreds of tests could reliably run only a handful. So Theranos quietly ran most of its blood work on modified commercial analyzers, machines made by other companies, the very machines Holmes said she'd made obsolete. When potential investors came to watch a fingerprick test run live, testimony showed the demonstrations were sometimes engineered, the device programmed to hide error messages, or the blood spirited away and run on those commercial machines in a back room, the real results never shown. The fingerprick samples were often so tiny they had to be diluted, which testimony showed could push results outside the range the machines were built to trust. Then there were the reports. Theranos handed investors validation documents stamped with the logos of Pfizer and Schering-Plough, as if those pharmaceutical giants had studied the technology and blessed it. On the witness stand, Holmes admitted she added those logos herself. The companies never authorized it. And this was not theoretical. By 2013, Theranos had gone live inside Walgreens stores in Arizona, offering its tests to the paying public. Real people walked in and had their blood drawn. Later, the company would void or correct tens of thousands of test results. One patient testified she'd been given a reading that falsely suggested she was miscarrying. Here is the human thing. She did not, on the record, wake up one day and decide to run a con. She moved one small line at a time. A projection stated as a fact. A logo added to reflect the work. A demonstration quietly rigged to succeed. Each step close enough to the last that it never felt like a cliff. That is how most people arrive at a fraud they'd have sworn they were incapable of, not in a leap, but in inches. And the inches added up to a company that took hundreds of millions of dollars from people who believed a lie. The investors were not naive amateurs. They were some of the most sophisticated money in the country. The family behind Walmart's fortune. Rupert Murdoch, who put in $125 million. The DeVos family, $100 million. Men and institutions whose entire job was to know better, and they wrote the checks anyway, because the story was intoxicating and the founder never blinked. But a lie about blood cannot stay a secret, because eventually someone bleeds. The first cracks came from inside. Two young employees, Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz, saw the tests failing. Tyler was the grandson of George Schultz, the former Secretary of State who sat on the Theranos board. He took his doubts to his own grandfather. His grandfather did not believe him. Believed the company instead. Think about that. A boy told the truth to a man who loved him, and love was not enough, because the story was too big and too flattering to give up. That is how prestige protects a fraud. Not with locks, but with the reluctance of decent people to believe they've been fooled. The employees took what they knew to a Wall Street Journal reporter, John Carreiro. In October 2015, his first story ran, "The machines didn't work, and Theranos was hiding it." The company came after the whistleblowers with lawyers and private investigators. For a while, the machine of intimidation nearly held. But the reporting kept coming, the regulators moved in, and by 2016 Theranos' own labs were being shut down. The $9 billion valuation went to zero. In 2018, the federal government indicted Elizabeth Holmes and her former partner and company president, Sunny Balwani, on charges of wire fraud and conspiracy. The charges split in two directions: fraud against the investors who funded her, and fraud against the patients who paid for her tests. Remember that split. It is the whole story. The trial began in 2021. And Holmes did something most defendants never do: she took the stand in her own defense. 7 days of testimony. She admitted the logos. She admitted Theranos used other companies' machines. But she framed it all as ambition that outran reality, not intent to deceive, the honest failure of a founder who believed to the end. And then the defense went somewhere darker. Holmes testified that Balwani, nearly 20 years her senior, her secret partner for much of it, had controlled and abused her, monitored her, shaped how she thought. Balwani, through his lawyers, categorically denied it. The jury was left to weigh whether that changed what she knew and when she knew it. Over 15 weeks, the jury heard from more than 30 witnesses, investors who described the pitches, employees who described the failures, patients who described the fear of a result that turned out to be wrong. Boxes of documents. Text messages between Holmes and Balwani. The government built its case the way it builds every fraud case, not on outrage, but on a mountain of small, provable facts. The prosecution kept it simple. It didn't matter how she felt. It mattered what she said to people who wrote checks, and whether she knew it was false when she said it. On January 3, 2022, after 7 days of deliberation, the jury came back. And what they decided is the part almost everyone gets wrong. 11 counts. The jury did not convict on all of them, and it did not acquit on all of them. It sorted. Guilty on 4 counts, 1 count of conspiracy to defraud investors, and 3 counts of wire fraud, each tied to a specific investor who lost millions. Not guilty on 4 counts, and every one of those acquittals was tied to the patients. The people who got the blood tests. The ones the public most wanted her punished for. On 3 remaining counts, the jury could not agree at all. A mistrial on those. Read it slowly, because it is stark. The jury found that she defrauded the wealthy investors who funded her. It did not find her guilty of defrauding the sick people who trusted her. Same lie. Same machine. Two completely different verdicts. Why? Not because the jurors decided the patients weren't hurt. It comes down to proof. To convict, prosecutors had to show beyond a reasonable doubt that Holmes knowingly deceived a specific person out of money. For the investors, there were the meetings, the emails, the doctored reports, the exact dollars wired on exact dates. A clean paper trail of a lie and a loss. For the patients, the chain was murkier: who exactly was misled, by whom, on which test, and whether Holmes personally and knowingly caused it. Harder to trace. Harder to prove. And in a courtroom, what cannot be proven does not count, no matter how true it feels. So the record and the public split apart. The country convicted her of poisoning the well of trust that sick people drink from. The law convicted her of taking rich men's money. We remember the blood. The verdict was about the wire transfers. In November 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. Sunny Balwani, tried separately, was convicted on all 12 of his counts, including the patient counts she was cleared of. 2 partners, 1 scheme, and even they did not fall the same way. Here is what the Theranos verdict really shows, and it has almost nothing to do with blood. We like our villains simple. We wanted the story to be a woman who hurt sick people and got what she deserved. That story is clean. It lets us feel the system works. But the record is stranger and more uncomfortable. The law is not a machine for delivering the punishment a crowd is craving. It is a narrow instrument that punishes only what can be proven, count by count, dollar by dollar. It moved fastest to protect the money, because money leaves a trail, and suffering often doesn't. So the fraud we all agree happened, and the fraud a jury would convict on, turned out to be 2 different things. She lied to everyone. She was convicted for lying to the ones with the receipts. So ask yourself, when the whole country agrees a person is guilty, what exactly do we mean? Guilty of what we can prove? Or guilty of the story we needed to be true? Follow for more.